the way we water today. Every garden begins the same way. A tap turns, water rushes forward, and before it ever reaches the roots, much of it is already gone. Sprinklers throw water into the air, where sunlight and wind quietly steal it away. Hoses flood the surface, where water spreads thin, runs sideways, and disappears into cracks and drains. What looks generous from above often leaves the soil beneath still waiting. This has become normal. We expect watering to be visible, loud, and constant. We expect effort. We expect waste. Yet the roots below the surface tell a different story. They do not want water sprayed across leaves or soil soaked all at once. They want steady access, delivered quietly, exactly when needed. Modern irrigation rarely provides that. The cost we don't see. Each time water is sprayed into the open air, a silent loss begins. Heat lifts moisture before it ever lands. Wind carries droplets away from their target. Runoff moves water past roots before they can absorb it. Studies consistently show that surface watering can lose 30 to 50% of its water before it benefits a single plant. That loss compounds day after day, week after week, season after season. The financial cost is easy to measure. Outdoor watering often accounts for a third or more of household water use during warm months. In dry climates, it can be much higher. But the hidden cost is time. Gardens demand constant attention. Miss a day and soil hardens. Miss two and leaves droop. The routine never pauses. Watering becomes a daily obligation, not a choice. When water feeds the wrong plants, surface watering does not discriminate. It feeds everything that can reach the moisture first. Seeds buried near the surface respond immediately. Weeds emerge fast, dense, and aggressive. They compete for water that never reaches deeper roots. Gardeners respond by watering more to compensate. The cycle repeats. In many traditional gardens, nearly a third of all labor goes into removing plants that were never planted. Time is spent undoing the effects of watering rather than growing food. The problem is not the gardener. It is the method, a different way to think about water. Soil is not passive. It does not wait patiently for water to arrive. Dry soil pulls. As moisture disappears, soil creates tension, drawing water toward itself with invisible force. The drier it becomes, the stronger that pull grows. This is not theory, it is physics. Roots depend on this tension to drink. They follow moisture gradients, growing toward stable sources rather than chasing brief floods. When water is delivered slowly, underground, and only when needed, the soil does the work. This is where the ancient solution begins. The buried clay pot. Imagine a simple clay vessel, unglazed, porous, strong enough to hold its shape, but open enough to breathe. Buried in soil and filled with water, it does not leak or drip. Instead, water moves through its walls only when the surrounding soil pulls for it. As the soil dries, moisture seeps outward. As the soil becomes moist, the flow stops. No switches, no valves, no moving parts. The soil controls everything. This system is known today by a single name, but its principle existed long before language gave it one. How the system regulates itself. Water inside the buried pot remains under slight pressure from the surrounding soil. Microscopic pores in the clay allow moisture to pass only when tension outside the pot exceeds the resistance of the clay. When the soil is already moist, there is no pull. Water stays inside. When roots absorb moisture and the soil dries, suction increases. Water moves outward slowly, evenly, and directly into the root zone. The flow responds moment by moment to real demand. Plants never experience flooding. They never experience drought. They receive water exactly as needed. Roots take control. Roots respond immediately to consistency. Instead of spreading thin across the surface, they cluster around the buried vessel. They form dense networks where moisture remains stable. This changes how plants grow. They become less stressed. Growth becomes more balanced. Nutrient uptake improves. The plant is no longer dependent on human schedules or weather patterns. It draws water when it needs it. The gardener steps back. What the instruments reveal. When scientists measure these systems, the results are precise and repeatable. Sensors placed near buried clay pots show soil moisture staying within the optimal range for root health. This range is known as field capacity, where soil holds enough water for plants without becoming saturated. Outside this zone, the soil remains dry. Graphs show smooth, gentle curves rather than sharp spikes. Water use stabilizes, losses disappear. In contrast, surface watering produces dramatic swings. Soil becomes briefly saturated, then dries rapidly as moisture escapes upward. Roots are forced to adapt to instability. With buried pots, instability disappears. An invention older than written history. This method did not emerge once. It emerged everywhere water was scarce. Ancient Chinese agricultural texts describe burying earthen jars among crops to survive dry seasons. These were not experiments. They were instructions for survival. Roman gardens used similar vessels, repurposing everyday clay pots as irrigation tools. Archaeological sites across Europe and North Africa reveal buried jars placed beside fruit trees and vines. In the Middle East, India, and parts of Africa, farmers shaped vessels from local clay, each adapted to regional soil and climate. Across the Americas, indigenous communities developed parallel systems, burying jars and channels beneath crops to conserve precious water. Different cultures, different materials, same conclusion. Water belongs underground. Why the method was abandoned. The disappearance of buried clay irrigation had nothing to do with failure. It had everything to do with scale. As agriculture industrialized, fields expanded. Machines replaced hands. Speed replaced precision. Clay pots could not survive plows and tractors. Plastic tubing could. Hoses, sprinklers, and drip lines suited large operations that prioritized coverage over efficiency. What worked for acres of monoculture fields quietly became standard for backyard gardens as well. Convenience replaced conservation. The plastic legacy, plastic irrigation systems promised simplicity. They delivered uniformity. They also delivered pollution. Sunlight weakens plastic. Pressure fractures it. Tiny particles shed into the soil. These fragments do not disappear. They accumulate. Soil samples from irrigated land now routinely contain hundreds or thousands of microplastic particles per kilogram. Clay, by contrast, returns to earth harmlessly. One system lingers forever. The other completes a cycle. What the numbers say. When buried, clay pots are tested against surface watering. The results are consistent. Water use drops by 60 to 70%, sometimes more. Crops receive the same or higher yields with a fraction of the water. The difference lies not in quantity but in delivery. Water stays underground. Evaporation nearly disappears. Runoff becomes irrelevant. Every drop works. How to use the system. Today, modern gardeners do not need special tools to adopt this method. Unglazed terracotta pots form the core of the system. Any drainage holes are sealed, so water exits only through the clay walls. The pot is buried with its opening just above the soil surface. It is filled with water and covered to prevent debris and evaporation. Plants are placed in a loose circle around the vessel, within reach of the moisture zone. Refilling is occasional. Once a week is common, sometimes less. The system adjusts itself. What changes in the garden? Watering becomes quiet, predictable, rare. Weeds struggle to emerge. Soil structure improves. Roots grow deeper and stronger. The gardener stops reacting and starts observing. The work shifts from constant maintenance to simple stewardship, a solution hiding in plain sight. As water shortages spread and resources tighten, solutions are often framed as new technologies, but some answers are already beneath our feet. A buried clay pot uses no electricity, creates no waste, requires no instructions once understood. It listens to the soil. Progress does not always move forward. Sometimes it circles back. The next time water sprays into the air and disappears before reaching the ground, remember this: there is a quieter way, a slower way, a way proven not by theory but by thousands of years of survival. It begins with clay. It ends with balance. If this story changed how you think about watering, share it with someone who still waters the surface. And if you want more stories that uncover forgotten solutions hidden in plain sight, stay connected. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Some of the most powerful ideas are the ones we stopped listening to.